All right, today I think we have something exciting going on. As part of the CuratorLab, I'm getting an opportunity to chat with another one of the curators in the lab, Chelsea. Yeah, we're both going to get to speak about our shows, get to ask each other about our shows. So I'm really, really excited to get to chat with Chelsea today, and I think we can get started.
Hello, nice to see you.
Good to see you virtually.
Yeah.
So I originally wanted to talk to you because I found your show, I found it quite refreshing in, not only I think the choice of all the collective of shows that we had. I think all of the shows in CuratorLab speak to each other, but I found yours very, very interesting because it had such a strong abstract voice to it. And for that reason, I think I was most interested to speak to you about your show and get to find out more about it. And I thought it would be an exciting opportunity for us to do it on this kind of platform. I also thought it was an exciting opportunity for us to learn about each other as emerging curators, as artists and people who are just interested in the art world. So thank you so much for being willing to do this with me. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you also for giving me the opportunity. I also was really, I found your show really, really interesting from a personal manner. I love photography, so it was nice to see, the artists and the work that you chose. So excited to have this conversation.
Okay, I think I'll get started. Okay, so there was one theme that I found interesting in your show, and you speak a lot about identity. And then you pair it with, abstract work and abstract art. So for me, I was very, very curious as a viewer how you read concepts like identity or the self in abstract work. I don't think the conventional viewer knows how to enter art from that point of view or enter abstract art from that point of view. So I thought it would be interesting to chat about.
Sure. So it's a nice question. I think, the self or identity is not one straightforward thing. We are these multifaceted human beings, and there's no one answer of like, who am I? And I think that speaks directly to abstract art, and like there's so many layers and so many depths within an abstract piece of work, just like there's so many layers within your identity. And I think I'd like to talk just a bit about one of the artists that were in my show, Thokozani Mtinyane. So I'm going to bring up some of his work. So let me do it this way. I had the opportunity to actually visit his studio in my process of curating this exhibition. And there's just, firstly, like you come into his studio and I've never seen so much work in one space by one artist. It's crazy and so beautiful. And he's playing like this really lovely classical and jazz music, like really loudly. And you walk through the space, and there were these unstretched canvases that he was working on, but placed all over the floor. And so I was kind of having to like maneuver my way around it and being careful not to stand on it. And he was like, no, it's fine. If you stand on the work, you stand on the work. It doesn't matter. I was like, okay. And I think, that is a nice element where that's almost like he's introducing kind of like the law of chance, and whatever happens in that space and in that moment. And that tells you something about the artist. And about, who he is and identity in that sense. But it's not obvious. And I think, that links to abstract art not being so obvious and clear, just like identity and self.
I love the, reiterating the complexity myself, and I think it's even more layered when associating with something that's not as cut and dry, like this is a portrait of myself and thus I'm explaining, or I am expressing myself or showing a part of myself, and finding something as intricate and as complex as as the work. And as I enjoyed what you spoke about when you said the law of chance, creating the work in Thokozane's work, which is very apparent in his work. I've gotten a chance to work with him once before, and I think it's beautiful. Yeah, I got to work with him last year. It's beautiful how his work is. It's poetic in a sense. I think his process is quite poetic.
It is.
Yeah, and it's very telling, even the way he communicates and just translates himself in a sort of his everydayness is quite apparent in his work, and so that I think that was a very special pick that you with an artist.
Yeah. Thank you. Cool. So am I going to ask you a question now? I mean, so your show kind of predominantly had artists working in photography, and I was just quite interested in that and why you chose that. And could you just speak a bit more about why photography?
I'm a photographer myself in my own practice, so naturally I think I lean towards that. I'm more inclined to respond to photography personally as a viewer, but I also think it's such an exciting medium. It's deceptive. Who's this? I think it's Richard Avedon. He says all photographs are accurate, but none of them tell the truth. And I think that's
quote.
I think that's so telling of photography as a practice. And for the artist, I think it's such a special tool. It can be something that documents, it can be something that is composed, but it sort of dances on that line between fact and fiction. So I really, really love that about the medium. So it's something I naturally lean towards. And I thought I would be quite true to myself with this particular show.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of, you get a sense, like us curating these shows, you kind of get a sense of, I don't know the actual curator, obviously all the artists involved, but everyone, the way I see things and what I'm naturally and personally drawn to is obviously going to be exist in the show as well as you. So it's nice to also see that element come through with all the different curators.
How did you find the works and artists shown in your exhibition?
So I guess there were different conversations that happened with all the different artists involved. So a lot of them actually I knew personally. Either just like one artist, Hamali Kusel, we studied together, and Tina Dube, I've just known over the years. He actually helped me with some printmaking back in the day. I really loved his work and just reached out to him. So we've kind of had that relationship. And yeah, other artists, I either had gone to an exhibition and came across them and was kind of slowly scouting and thinking of ways for my own show, and either came across them and then had them in mind and then reached out to them. The only kind of one that was slightly complicated was Nou Barreto, who lives in Paris. So I didn't know him. I followed him for a while, and I love his work. And I just reached out to him on Instagram, like explained this is the program that I'm a part of, and I'd love to include you, and can we just set up a time to chat? And he was really open and really like keen and willing to be a part of it and also help me. So I'm really grateful that he was so willing. So yeah, it was a really nice process. I really enjoyed reaching out to people, chatting to the artists, and for it to just happen organically.
I think it's I romanticize about that as a part of a curator's sort of way. If I imagine a curator, I do imagine someone who is in the galleries, you know, walking past the street, finding an artist, finding out their stories, and investigating and actively doing so. So I quite enjoy that, and I think I relate to you in a lot of ways when it comes to that.
Yeah, it did. It did kind of feel like that. It was quite an exciting few weeks of kind of just going out and about and thinking of ways. It's something that I really want to do more of. So it was a really nice, opportunity. In your show, the strong themes that you speak to are home and belonging. I was interested, do you think these two concepts link closely to each other? And what does home mean to you?
I think that's one of the biggest existential questions I've been asking myself lately. And, you know, I think with this exhibition and just in general, I've been really debating the idea of home and what it means. In talking to different people, you find out that home can mean a place. To other people, home is a person. But the sort of one thread that I found, you know, running through everything was this idea of belonging. Some home can be a place, person, a time, a memory that claims you, that accepts you, and so I thought in that case, home and belonging sort of become synonymous. And so for the meaning of home, I would say then a place that, well, for now, perhaps that'll change 3 months from now for me, something I always think about. But for now, I've been thinking a lot about home being a place or a concept of belonging.
Yeah, it's almost like home can be a feeling as well. And I think it's there's so many layers within home and belonging. And also I wanted to ask, you were in France last year, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So I think, is there, because your artists are from France and from South Africa, was that intentional to kind of, it's another layer of you being in France and in South Africa, and then so your artists?
Yeah, I think it was. And, in my time in France, I was in France in the middle of the pandemic. So I felt a little bit further from home than I think I normally would have. But I think any expat's experience of home is the community you build. And Asaf Shoshan, for example, he's an expat living in France. He's been there for over 20 years, originally from Israel. While his story is a bit more complex than mine, I am, you sort of find these pockets and communities of people. And so I thought that was a very truthful reflection of what a group of people that represented home to me at one stage and another group of people that represented home to me at another time. Yeah. So what was your process, or what's your general process when curating an exhibition? How do you go about it?
I mean, I guess this was the first sort of exhibition I've ever curated, and it was digital. So, there's a very different kind of approach you take, I think, when something's digital or whether it's in person. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is, how am I going to engage an audience? So obviously I think it's a lot easier, or not easier, but there's so much more you have to think about when people are actually going to move through a space. Whereas online, it's slightly more complicated because, everything is online these days. We face with content all the time. So how am I going to engage an audience really well that's going to pull them in? And I was kind of thinking of ideas around that, and I don't really have an answer or a solid answer, but what I came up with was more just in the way I wrote. So in the curatorial statement there, my show is called What Shapes Us, Makes Us, and Guides Us. And so end off, just, it's subtle. I just say what shapes you, makes you, guides you, to kind of, engage the audience and get them to think, oh, okay, what does shape me and make me and guide me? And I'm going to be thinking about that while I'm looking at all these other artists who are also talking about what shapes and makes and guides them. But to answer your question more, which was my process, I spoke a little bit about it. I went to the few opening exhibitions that were happening considering COVID, and just sort of, subtly kind of scouting and viewing and having conversations with different artists. And I didn't necessarily have a solid idea of this is my concept, this is what I want to say, and then I'm going to fit artists into that. I more wanted it to kind of happen organically, which, is maybe a harder way to go about it. So I wasn't really quite sure what I was going to, what I wanted it to be about. I had some idea, but I more spoke to artists that I was drawn to, that I really appreciated, and then kind of coming up with a list of these artists that I really enjoyed. And I noticed this like common thread that existed between all of them, and it was abstraction and mark making and the medium they were using. And it all just kind of fell together naturally and organically the way I wanted. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Like, I think it's quite a poetic process. It's not confining the work to a preset concept and theme. In that case, you're letting art be art, which I really, really I appreciate. Yeah.
Thank you. Also, I'm really interested to know how you found these artists and the works for your show, and also what is your process when curating?
I think, the process and how I find them are quite similar. Most of them, it's either through, short or quickly formed friendships or long-standing friendships. One artist I met in a friend's apartment in Paris, and we spoke about art. And so, I held on to a lot of sort of memories of some works of theirs that I really enjoyed. Another artist, they're South African, but I met them in the middle of the south of France, and I really, really enjoyed her process. Another artist, I think the only artist I hadn't physically met was Manyaku Mashilo. And I had known her sister's work because I'd gotten a small chance to work with her sister Kalmash's work, but there was really, I had followed her for quite a long time, and similar to you, I just reached out and said I would really, really love to work with you. So I think CuratorLab has really been just a helpful stepping stone to use that as a platform to work with artists we've, really wanted to work with.
Cool. Yeah, it's such a nice, just those networks are so important, and, holding on to a random encounter that you have. And it's so nice when they, you can use that and have that. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any particular works that are, particularly memorable for you in this show, and, why?
I mean, every work in the show kind of, touches on something deep for me. But one particular work that's standing out for me right now, I would say, is Talia Lubinsky's. Basically, her, it's called Marble Dust, which is an installation. And she basically was doing research on cemeteries in South Africa. And that led her to a cemetery called the Mamelodi Cemetery. And it's a really loaded place where it was a burial for Black political prisoners hanged by the apartheid state in the 1960s. So it's really, really, just a lot to swallow. And these people were buried with no gravestones. Some weren't even buried, and there's just these bones that exist and have been slowly like disintegrating and almost becoming dust. But so when Talia was in the offices of the cemetery, there were these pages that listed grave numbers and names and dates of the burials, and they were kind of scattered across the floor and piled in boxes. And the paper was also disintegrating and torn. And so her process, she traced the contours of the decomposing pages and then carved them out of marble. And there's like this kind of play, and play is the wrong word, but of permanence and something lasting forever, like the marble slab and like a gravestone for when someone dies. And then something very fragile, like the paper that's tearing and disintegrating. And so the way she's carved the marble slabs really incorporate both the sense of disintegrating, of loss, of the fragility of life, and then as well as something like so solid and so permanent and that's everlasting. So yeah, I just think for me, it's really stayed with me, her work. Yeah, I didn't go through all the images. So, this was this was the paper that's torn and disintegrating, and that's what kind of shaped her marble slabs. Yeah. I think this should be the last question, but which work or works in particular most powerfully represented home and belonging that you speak to?
Okay, well, I think on the sort of the most immediate sense, I would lean towards sense of belonging. The title obviously gives us that sort of indication by Bongani Shabalala. But I think what I really enjoyed in the exhibition, or what I enjoyed sort of playing with, was this idea of home consistently being challenged, like in Asaf's work that you've got there.
Sorry, that's Bongani's, hey?
Yeah, that's the Bongani work.
There we go.
And then in that work by Asaf, he did I really enjoy his story on the photo series he did here, where he went back to Jerusalem to, where he was born. And, they're photographs, but they all sort of are a little bit contentious. They kind of speak about this concept of home. You've got two figures, intimate lighting, they look towards each other. So there's some sort of security and comfort, but then he magically puts them in a doorway, one on the inside, one on the outside. And so while they do give a sense of belonging, they contest that idea of belonging or home. And I really enjoyed Janine Allen and Andre Rose's photos. So they worked together, this photo and then this next one. They worked together on this project called Eureka, and they were looking at the conditions in the mines in Kimberley, and they obviously investigate personal stories of people, and their ideas of home are more, they give you this idea of a sort of structure, but then they also introduce a socioeconomic debate to this idea of home as well. So all of the works in the show, I think to some extent they give you that comfort, and then they also challenge that idea of home, which I really enjoyed when finding the works.
No, that's so true. That is what something that I felt when viewing all your shows. There is this kind of really deep sense of belonging within the photograph, but also something quite, I don't know, like pulls you back. It was really interesting.
Thank you for being open to chat, for giving the time. I don't think we are, even though we're all at home right now, it seems like time's moving quicker. So thank you for offering your time and just being willing to chat and have a good moment where we can discuss art. So I really appreciated, this today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Bontle. Yeah, it was so nice to chat and get to hear a bit more about the exhibition. So thank you.